Hi everybody, and a big thank you out to McCarthy Insurance Group based here in Cork City. We're very grateful to have them on board as one of our sponsors for the Long Way Back podcast. A big thank you from all of the team here at the Long Way Back. Now on to the show. Welcome back to the Long Way Back podcast. We have a very special guest here this evening with myself and Georgie,
Thanks.
our co-host tonight. We have Deirdre Madden. She's an assistive technology expert in UCC, but she also works with primary schools and secondary schools and helps with all the different technologies to be able to help children and young adults with learning differences. So before we get to you, Deirdre, Georgie, you know Deirdre a long time.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I actually went out to find Deirdre when I first started kind of learning about what's going on over here, and I was looking for some help with technology. I wanted all the update apps and what could help kids with learning differences. And I attended a course that you were running, and I was blown away. I was completely blown away. There was so much information and so much that was helpful. And I remember going home that day and just downloading 10,000 things, you know. But Microsoft 365, that was a game changer, being able to store everything on the cloud and learning about, there are so many things, Deirdre, for visually impaired, hearing impaired, anyone with a learning difference. And I'm so pleased to have you here, that we can grill you with questions.
So what is your title? What would you say your title is?
It's a mouthful, and I'm not sure it's a mouthful that's relevant to the people I'm targeting.
Yeah.
I'm the Assistive Technology Outreach Coordinator.
Okay.
So in UCC, we've got like over 2,200 students registered with the Disability Support Service just now. Textbook, pen and paper, traditional teaching and learning tools don't suit everybody the same, and technology can offer really viable alternatives. In UCC, people get an assessment and they get recommended the technology, and importantly, they got the training in how to use the technology.
Right.
There's no point in handing somebody a device and going, off you go, figure that out in your spare time.
That's a great point, Deirdre, because we were just speaking beforehand. When I was in MTU, I was given assistive technology, I was given Dragon and another few different pieces of software to help me. But I was getting very frustrated around the learning side of it, because I didn't actually want to sit and watch a load of videos. I didn't want to read some of the descriptions of how it worked.
The big long manuals that are intimidating,
Because I was already under stress, because I was behind the rest of the classroom with assignments and exams and stuff and learning from exams. So like I found learning how to use assistive technology just another thing to pull me back from what I was supposed to be doing, which was trying to do assignments.
The content of the course,
so has that changed? Or is there a better way of learning how to use the assistive technology?
All technology is a pain in the neck when you're getting used to it. It is. Your new dishwasher, your new car. The difference is that if you're driving away in your new car and you turn on the indicator and the windscreen wipers come on, you're going, oh, for crying out loud. But nobody gets out of the car and walks. We don't throw in the towel. We persist a small bit. Do you know when you get your beautiful new mobile phone and you're thrilled because the other one has battery life of an hour and a cracked screen, but you start using it and like within 10 minutes, you're cursing and swearing at it because it doesn't work. I'll have to get used to this. But we stick with it. And it's that persistence that pays off. Now, what's really hard, I think, for teachers is with the best will in the world, when they're handed that new device that has been recommended and they fought tooth and nail for funding to get it in the door, they're being pulled in a million different directions and they haven't had the training in it. So to be fair to my boss, Linda Doran, and my previous boss, Mary O'Grady, they came up with the Assistive Technology Outreach Programme to reach outside UCC to increase awareness of assistive technology and then to provide the hands-on training for teachers and SNAs. And for a long time, we were doing training for students and parents as well. We're just reviewing that at the moment to improve it.
Is this just in Cork, or are there other people like you with positions like you in Ireland?
There's a lot of assistive technology officers in various colleges, and they do a little bit of outreach work. But Mary and Linda valued this so much that they created a proactive program to reach out and to at a time. This was like 2012, so like this was their budgets were pretty tight, and that they made this happen, I think, is hugely to their credit, because they've seen the difference that it can make. If I can tell a couple of stories, so I won't say, I'll do different names. We had a student who was blind in primary school. Her mother read all her textbooks to her and scribed all her homework for her until she learned touch typing. Hugely important. You're going to be so sick of me saying touch typing, file management, and teachers sharing their teaching and learning materials online. That makes a game changer for people who struggle with reading and writing. So Mom was now reading her textbooks. She was typing her homework and controlling the computer completely with the keyboard. So Control P is print, Control S is save. So it's vital that she knows the keyboard really well. Then she got digital textbooks on her device, learned to use a screen reader. I'm saying this now in very short sentences. This was a lot of slog and a lot of work and determination. So now Mom got her life back. The student was independently doing her writing, independently doing her reading, and ready for a transition into secondary school. But it's the IT skills, never mind the AT skills. The AT only kind of sits on the fundamental IT skills, I think. But that student has graduated with her master's in intellectual property law. And the last I saw of her was up in Dublin Castle with her guide dog and her laptop. Now, she's a really bright woman. She's a very hard-working woman. She was supported by a fabulous family. She was supported by great educators on the way up. But if she was still using pen and paper and textbook, she'd be in some supported employment thing. Yeah. And I've worked in those scenarios. The people for whom they're right, they're fantastic. But for somebody like that, that's just storing up mental health issues for the long run. And more importantly than that, and then her having the opportunity, I hope, to make a fortune and to have a stimulating, fulfilling job, is your legal system, and mine now have the perspective of a woman who's vision impaired in that profession. That wasn't there before because textbook, pen and paper were not the tools that would help her fulfill her potential.
She also obviously had a lot of help from her family and support.
Massive,
So sometimes that's not something that
you
happens.
can't take that for granted.
You know, so this child was obviously very lucky that her family were able to support her in some way like that. But say, for example, if it's a child, if the same situation was happening for a child that was coming from a family where things were completely different, a single parent family, and maybe that parent couldn't maybe read or write or didn't have the time
or the IT skills.
It's a case where kids are kind of they're slipping through the cracks. Are schools, do you think, doing enough in that area to help children with these learning differences and disabilities?
Do you mean with the technology or in general?
In general.
There's a lot more awareness now than there was before. There's a lot more being done. I think one of the problems is it isn't part of initial teacher training as a compulsory part of it. To my knowledge, last year's Leaving Cert students, 1 in 5 students who sat the Leaving Cert had special accommodations in their exams. The Junior Cert students, it was 1 in 4. So that's 20 and 25% of every classroom who have a diagnosis.
Right.
And we know the kids who are in there who don't have a diagnosis. So it's no longer we teach our course and then we have to teach it a bit differently because we have a deaf student or we have a vision impaired student or we have a student with dyspraxia or whatever. This is every classroom. So the solution to that is universal design for learning.
You're absolutely right.
But I think to explain I remember hearing about universal design for learning the first time and going, God, isn't that lovely in Fantasyland? That's a utopian idea. It's really nice, but it's not going to work. And I've done that's a long time ago. I've done a full 180. It is the only sustainable, viable way forward. Excuse me. Sorry, Les.
No, fine.
And I know universal design for learning is a mouthful, but the example I always give is in your houses, do you have a handle that's like a lever? Yeah. On the doors, yeah? Do you remember doorknobs? Are you old enough to remember doorknobs? So doorknobs were on 100% of doors because you can push the door closed, you can pull it open and you can twist it, which was fine unless you had arthritis. The lever handles in your doors in your houses were developed for people with arthritis. The kind of the Shagad Love Us for the disabled people handles that were expensively designed by occupational therapists for people who had grip problems, retrofitted in their home so that they could open and close the doors in their houses, but then they went to someone else's house and if the doorknob if they couldn't manage it, then they're stuck inside a room or outside a room. But it dawned on people, that's just a really well-designed handle. When I'm carrying the baby, I can open the door at my elbow. When I'm carrying a pile of books, I can open the door to my backside if I need to. That's a well-designed handle. If there's a ramp up into your building here, it means I can push my trolley of laptops. You can push your bike. You can push the buggy. You can push your wheelchair. That it's just, it's universally accessible.
Yeah.
So I think the next step, and it is happening to a certain extent, is universal design for learning. That when I present a subject, I present it in a load of different ways for people who process information differently to take it in. And that we do our assessments in a lot of different ways as well. It isn't a one assessment for everybody because it doesn't play to everybody's strengths.
Do you think we're actually finding too many labels for different stuff for people these days? Because like I'm sure now you're up in UCC and a young person comes up to you, an 18-year-old just after leaving school, just finished the leaving something, they're coming in, they're struggling with something in college, and you're saying like, Jesus, this child here is probably dyspraxic or they may have dyslexia. Like how did they even go through the whole secondary school? You know, and do you think we're actually dealing with these kind of things enough, you know, within society, within colleges, and you know, how are we going to cope with it? Because there's actually so many people with learning differences that actually don't get assessments.
The way to deal with it is that universal design for learning. And like I know in UCC, whether you have a diagnosis or not, there's a lot of supports there. You can, if you have a load of journals to read for an assignment you're doing, you can email them or links to them to the library, to Census Access, and ask for it back in a sound file. And they'll email it back to you in maybe, take minutes is what it takes. You can have it emailed back to you in a sound file, translated into Italian, read by this voice at this speed. And our vision impaired students who use Braille can get it back in a Braille refreshable file that they can. It's about having the learning materials in the format that will suit that person's learning process, learning
down
styles.
The language and yeah.
Or just, I mean, some people might process it very, very quickly orally, but they would really struggle with the reading. So they might have the pace really fast in the reading. It depends on how you learn and how used to those tools you are. So say some of the vision impaired people that I've worked with, that maybe they get all their information from their phone, the visual information from their phone orally. When I hear what they're listening to, I can't distinguish individual words. It just sounds like blah, 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 because they're so used to taking the information in that way. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah,
That's fine. I don't even know. I don't know if I asked the question in the right way. I lost track of myself halfway through. Georgie?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about a boy that I worked with who had dyslexia, and actually, funny enough, I met them on your course, and he had just got through primary school. He worked so hard, but he really, really, really struggled. And I saw him after he'd just gone to secondary school, and secondary school was quite overwhelming. And his mum came to me with him and said, you know, I don't know what we're going to do. Like the homework that is expected from him is just huge. He cannot write this stuff down. He can't touch type. He can't. And I said, well, what about dictation? Has he? And she said, oh, we don't know how to do that. You know. And I think they tried Dragon and it didn't. They found it very frustrating because Dragon at the time couldn't recognize his language. But then we found the dictation
in Word,
and I cannot tell you the change on his face when I said, well, just write down everything you've just told me. Sorry, not write down everything, just dictate it into the computer. Sure enough, there it was. And he was absolutely bowled out, the smiling. And his mum said, you know, it's the first time I've seen him smile in months, because he's just found a way forward.
And you see people's shoulders straighten up, and you see them, look what I wrote. I get that. I just wanted to say two things about that. Dragon, naturally speaking, is brilliant. The big issue with it is the specifications on the laptop and the headset.
Right.
If you don't have the right specifications to run it, and you need more than what it says on the tin to run it efficiently, and a headset with a USB connection, then it's brilliant. And it works offline. So it's possible that it might be allowed in the state exams. But the big thing I wanted to point out was I think people throw in the towel on the touch typing way
There's
too
that
early.
perseverance you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you think, do you know when you pick up a pen, do you have to remember what way to hold that in your hand, or does your hand remember it for you?
My hand remembers it for me.
When you're writing a word, you don't have to think about what's the shape of an F and the shape of a P.
Right.
You could write a shopping list while shouting at somebody, bring the dog in out the garden or something. That's muscle memory. How that you weren't born with that skill. How did you develop that skill?
Practice, yeah.
How often?
My goodness.
2-3
I'm a
hours a day.
teacher, I write
No,
a lot.
but even, do you remember the handwriting copies on Go? You did 10 minutes every night for your homework. Boring, tedious, easy.
I spent hours on my homework because I had to write out thousands of
Lines.
I spent most of my day in school writing out lines.
But
I
when-
will not do this anymore.
But when students are handed the laptop that's been recommended by whoever, and it's locked in the cupboard because it's very expensive and you have to mind it, and they take it out twice a week for, I don't know, aerobic exercise for their knuckles or something, as opposed to you're now your writing tool. Therefore, you need to be practicing your touch typing 10 minutes every day with the hands covered. Because then if you're looking down, that's sight typing, that's not touch typing.
Yeah.
If you the next time you're on the keyboard, you know about the bumps on the F and the J keys?
Yeah, I've used
Yeah.
TTRS.
Okay.
And
And it's tedious and boring, but it's how you develop
I actually liked
a skill.
It.
Oh, good. Excellent.
I liked it because it was like, and I was just sitting there and I thought, God, I used to love doing it because I used to plan it for about 20 minutes a day and I became very good at it. But I stopped because I got so busy then with the studying for exams. And when I say studying for my exams now, I sat there for hours, frustrated because nothing was going in. And I'd get up and I'd go into the exam and I was going into my exams and I'd have words scribbled on my pants that might give me a bit of an understanding of what I need to answer for a certain question that might come up. It was a very, very frustrating time for me because my brain couldn't retain the information that I was trying to learn.
And then very often the fear or the anxiety
Oh,
about a new
scribbled.
course or a new assignment
I
can
scribbled.
stop
Yeah.
your natural learning and your good learning, your positive learning, your ability.
Yeah.
You can just get so kind of riddled with tension because of it.
It was a really, really difficult period of my life. And I suppose just going back, right, I just want to take us back small bit and just maybe starting in primary school where a lot of stuff comes up for parents around their kids and their learning differences and stuff. So let's go through maybe some of the different learning differences that some of the kids have. Now, say for dyslexia, dyspraxia and dyscalculia, what kind of software packages would be available for parents to be able to help their kids to be able to learn in a different way?
You kind of have to step back from thinking it's technology for the diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a student to get the right assistive technology for them, you look at their strengths and their difficulties, what the task is, whether it's writing or reading or seeing, concentrating, focusing, whatever the task is that they're struggling with. Then you look at some technologies that might address it, and you have to look at it in the environment in which they're working as well. And to make maybe an example would help make sense. If I've got a student who's vision impaired and they're in primary school and there's these huge old magnifiers that you can shove the textbook in and that's magnifying the text, and that's perfect for a solution in a primary school. That doesn't work when you're changing classes every 40 minutes in secondary school, unless you have a donkey to take it from class to class. Or I know a school where it's all iPads, but the 3 students in a particular class who've had a diagnosis and a recommendation from an educational psychologist or an occupational therapist were all given laptops. So they're now using a different interface to their peers. So you need to look at the environment, and unless there is something that device can do for that student that they really need and the other device can't, you need to be using or maybe the secondary school that they're going to transition to get them ready for that moving on as well.
I actually have a question about that because one of the parents asked me she's had a very frustrating time because her son is going on to secondary school and he has a laptop, but the school is an iPad only school. And she said they had told her it doesn't have the same software that he has. So she says, what do you do in a situation like this? Do you insist that he has a laptop, or do you go with the iPad and then have to learn a whole new, or maybe it's not as complicated as that.
Well, you can access Google on an iPad. You can access Office 365 on an iPad. Like you can, it depends on what the school. In general, the schools are divided into either they use the Google platform or they use the Office 365 platform.
Okay.
You can access both of them on any device that you can access the internet on, really. But I think part of the 5th class and 6th class plan should be, if you know what secondary school you're going on to help to transition to that. But the baseline,
That's a really good point.
but the baseline skill of, have I mentioned, touch typing, file management, and then
Should parents be helping their children to do touch typing and file management before they go to school, or should schools actually be helping these?
it hasn't formed part of teacher training.
Okay.
And that's where we go back to the basics. I
Yeah.
really think this needs to be part of initial teacher training, and I'm delighted to say that I'm given a workshop in the School of Education above, and I've already been working with the PME students, giving them, I think it was like about 2 hours on assistive technology specifically. But again, when there's such a large proportion of students have an official diagnosis, and then add on the students who don't have a diagnosis on top of that, it can't be the back door up to the building anymore. This has to be for everybody.
I was going to say, it has to fall under the umbrella of having an improvement in teacher training when it comes to special educational needs overall. There has to be, this should be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what so many teachers say to me is, we weren't trained.
Wonderful teachers bend
Wonderful.
over backwards to try and make this work.
Go out of their way, yeah.
I know teachers who took all the school devices home to update them or to install software, and not having had training on a load of this. And that's the IT skills, ever before you go near maybe the more specialised AT skills. But I think the same way as people learn handwriting, I do think touch typing should be 10 minutes of homework every single night.
100%,
And outside the students for whom, like the touch typing will help the dyslexic students because they're spell checkers and grammar checkers, they can have their typed work read aloud back to them. So I can give you a page of text and it could be a sentence long. And when I read over it, my head puts in the punctuation.
Yeah.
So I
don't understand it at all.
But if you have it read back to you, you'll hear, I need to shorten that up, or I need to put in a few full stops there. Proof listening to your typed work can help you independently improve your written work. Way better than getting it handed back to you with looking like measles, a load of red dots all over the page. I'm not sure I learned a whole lot about punctuation from that, but listening to it, I hear where I should punctuate. But the touch typing, outside it being a game changer for that vision impaired student, for the students who have literacy issues, whether it's dyslexia, whether it's their hearing difference has made their literacy skills more difficult to acquire. Name a job where any of them aren't going to be using a keyboard.
This is it. So, because parents ask me, should I persevere with the handwriting or should we do touch typing? And I said, look, it's all very individual, but the fact is, they are going to be expected to be typing at second level and in the workforce. So we are going to have to practice that. But we don't want to, I don't necessarily want to give up on handwriting altogether either because of the muscle memory of the formation of letters. I know there's a big...
But outside that, if the student, my daughter is in her final year in college, she types all her notes, she types all her assignments, and she has to go do handwriting in her exam. But like for the junior cert, because she doesn't type in her exams, she hasn't got a diagnosis. The vast majority of students then who are writing for their junior cert and their leaving cert, if they lose that handwriting skill, my handwriting has, because I don't handwrite anything anymore, my handwriting's gone down the toilet. If I had to do a 3-hour exam in the morning, my hand would fall off.
And it's interesting because some students
I
actually
wouldn't be
prefer
able
to handwrite than to touch type. I think
And,
there's a fear.
and it comes back to kind of what you were saying. We have to figure out the different learning styles and strengths that people have.
Yeah.
So I'm doing work with a school at the moment where we're trying to embed the free and built-in technology that's in their pockets already in the school to give them reading alternatives, writing alternatives, and not just for the students with a diagnosis, but to give everybody choices for how they learn. And as we've been exploring it, one of the things that has come up is going, yes, we know touch typing is a fabulous skill, and the students who will be typing in the exam, we're making sure that they are really practicing and they're increasing how many words per minute they have and what percentage of accuracy they have. But we also need to make sure that the students who are going to be writing in the Leaving Cert have their writing skills good as well. So that's a balance in between the two. But as we were going through it as well, they said, look, I'm a big fan of mind mapping. It doesn't work for everybody. A lot of the students took to it really quickly. A lot of the teachers embraced it really well. But then there's the students for whom they don't work. So we're just doing the opposite side of the same coin. So what we've said now is we've got a small mind map, a free one that comes with Google called Mind Mup 2. It's brilliant.
Mind Mup.
Yeah, I'll show it to you later. And we have a link to a self-assessment where you answer a couple of questions. It's not very long. And it says what kind of learning style you have. So one of the models is VARK, V-A-R-K. It's our visual, an auditory, reading and writing, or a kinesthetic learner. So do I learn by seeing stuff so that diagrams and representations and mind maps and really good visuals help me? I can I can understand information better. I can retain it and recall it better. The auditory one is, do I remember what I hear better? Like, I really like lectures because I feel like I'm being spoon-fed information and it stays in my head. Other people, it doesn't. The R is the reading and writing one that we've pitched at everybody ever since we started education systems, and we know the people it doesn't suit, that have fabulous skills to offer the world, but have their self-esteem nearly has been battered by this. The kinesthetic learners are those that learn by doing, that they love the practical subjects, or they just need to be moving even to learn. So there's a short quiz where they go down through that, and it identifies that, you have a huge component of reading and writing or a huge component of auditory. And then it guides them to the speech-to-text tools or the text-to-speech tools, that you listen to your book rather than you read your book, or that you make your mind map. So it's trying to guide them, and it's coming back from that one-size-fits-all approach to education. Well,
it is.
we'll
I
see
mean,
now.
it's because in the sort of the non-technical side of kind of teaching kids or adults with learning differences is we always talk about multisensory. It's the same thing as this idea of universal, or it may be that you can try and find ways to tap into a number of different senses, because you might be quite good at visual and auditory, or useless at visual and auditory and more kinesthetic. So absolutely.
What's the name of that software, just to repeat?
It's a mind mapping software called Mind Mup, and I think I can give you links to videos and stuff on
So
this.
all the links to any of the softwares we speak about tonight, maybe others as well, there will be a link in the description for everything.
Because I was actually going to say, Timmy, you mentioned TTRS, and for
TTRS,
listeners, they might want to know what that is.
It's a touch type.
Touch type, read, spell.
Yeah.
There you go.
So it's a touch typing program, but there's literacy support in it.
Yeah.
For people who struggle with the phonetics or literacy, there's stuff to help around spelling and that within it as well.
And apparently some local libraries offer TTRS.
All over the country, local libraries will offer free licenses in it.
Ah, fantastic.
Now, there's lots more free ones. There's typing.com, Typing Club.
There's Nessie as well, I think. Or they're free.
I don't think that's free.
Right, yeah.
BBC Dance Mat do a lovely one for much younger learners.
right,
But if I hear Gary the Goat once more, I was going to type on me. He's a Liverpudlian goat.
But again, it's perseverance, because I remember learning to touch type and it was deadly. Oh my goodness, I wanted to run out of there.
Yeah.
But I did, we got it. And it saved my bacon, because I tell you, when I was doing my degree, there was some very last minute hand-ins at sort of 3 o'clock in the morning of touch typing in the dark.
Yeah. Tell me this, Deirdre, with some of the technologies that have come out in the last few years, Georgie, all these different areas, ChatGPT, Quillbot, these are pieces of software that will basically write an essay if you put something in, and you can tweak it in a different way. And I'm sure it's fantastic in what it's doing, because it's helping a lot of people who are really, really stressed out of their minds in relation to the work they have to do for assignments, and they're not able for it. And it's helping them to just get over the line. Where are colleges around all this stuff at the moment? Are they happy with it? Are they strengthening their plagiarism softwares to catch people out? What is going on? Because it's
all really new.
It's really,
so people are figuring it out as they're going along.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of fear around it. There have been students who handed in entire assignments that definitely weren't theirs. That doesn't do them any favours either.
And a teacher would know that straight away by their work ethic in the classroom.
They know how the student has been writing all along, and all of a sudden it's an entirely different, it's not comparable. I think it's like a tool.
Yeah.
And any tool can be used for really good stuff or for really bad stuff. And it's up to us how we use it. I think we need to start doing a lot more around teaching critical thinking all the way up through schools. Unfortunately, a lot of the plagiarism stuff doesn't detect a lot of the AI stuff now because it changes all the time. It's not like there would have been older plagiarism stuff where they can search the internet and they know, oh, those 3 paragraphs were on that site and that site. But because it changes all the time, that's the nature of the artificial intelligence. For the most part, it's undetectable. What really worries me about it is a lot of educators had come away from the exam at the end of the year that used to freak a load of people out, didn't measure for a lot of people their best performance because the anxiety kicked in or the worry of the exam kicked in, and we'd been moving away to multiple forms of assessment, which is part of universal design, where it might be continual assessments or projects on the way. But now the AI has put that stuff in danger because how can we guarantee that this is that person's work and that they're getting that person is getting the right marks and you're not giving an unfair advantage or, introducing lack of fairness into the whole thing.
And this is a huge shame because actually a lot of the people I work with would really benefit from continuous assessment rather than sitting in a timed exam and stressing out.
100%.
And that's it's really sad that's a problem, that's against them. And God, we've got to. They pop up every day, don't they? And it's a constant fight, a constant battle.
Even myself at the moment, I'm doing a master's in UCC in mindfulness coaching, and I use Otter. We spoke about it, but with the Otter, I can just speak into it and I can describe exactly what I need to talk about. Maybe, say for example, I just have to completing session 3 on an 8-week MBSR program in a company, and I need to speak about how I felt going in there, how I felt doing the meditations, what came up for me in relation to how I was thinking about, how I was feeling, and how the action then that came after the way I was feeling and thinking. Okay, I can speak directly into Otter, and that will just transcribe everything in detail. But if I try to do that on a laptop, I will take days. I mean days.
Yeah.
And I will change stuff 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Okay? And I get completely overwhelmed then with anxiety, and before long after that then the voice starts coming into my head. You should pack this up, you're not able for it. This isn't fueled hall, And these pieces of software have dramatically helped me, to just get what I feel out. And sometimes the words that I am putting into the Otter, I get a bit of help then off Quillbot to maybe help me. It's just a word it a little bit more. And it's like, when I'm looking at the finished piece, it's like I'm looking at it and I say, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Okay. But I didn't have the wording to say it because of my own learning differences, like the ADHD, not being able to sit in the chair for too long and struggling with the reading.
And doubting yourself.
Consistently. Yeah. That's a belief that I have since I'm a young child. And then the dyslexia, perception of stuff, the questions, like I wrote out answers to questions that were like lecturers have said to me, that's not the question we asked at all. Like, why didn't you ask us? Like, I know what my lecturer said. I'm a lecturer in UCC. He's fantastic, and I'm blessed to have 2 of them, and Pascal and Pat. And they're like there's no issue. Like, if I have an issue with anything and I'm struggling, I can go to him directly, and we talk very relaxed. And there's a lot of compassion toward me. And I think a lot of lecturers in UCC are like that, and abroad when because of the like, it's everywhere. We have people that are struggling with different learning differences, and they're really trying their best, but there's so much pressure on students today, Deirdre, to be able to be good students and know what they're supposed to be. And it's not even coming from themselves. The pressure is coming from parents in some cases, and that's difficult. Like my own daughter, she have her own stuff going on, and like, and Georgie, you work with her, and like, the most important thing for me and my wife Nicole is that child's well-being.
And their self-esteem, everything else builds on that.
Deirdre, nothing else. Because I'm just finishing this. Because of my own life experiences and struggling with education all during my young life, and then becoming a mature student, wanting being able to get into education, I've done all right. You know, I had a few ups and downs along the way, but I've done all right.
You've done all right. You've done absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
so when we started to do this, I just want students also to know, like, that if you don't do well in the Leaving Cert or the college, it's not the end of the world.
Definitely not.
It's not the end of the
Definitely
world.
not the end of the world.
You know, you will go on to learn more in life, and then go on to maybe do something else in college that you really enjoy doing.
Or not college.
Yeah.
And I don't believe I'm here.
Absolutely.
I don't believe,
Yeah.
I'll be shocked by UCC. My job is access to UCC for students who have been disadvantaged because of a disability on the way up through learning. But college is not the be-all and end-all. And I think we've worked so hard at increasing access to college, because for a very long time it was, if your daddy was a lawyer, then you were on that path, and if you know, it was the same proportion of society had access to advantage all the time. And that should have been challenged, and it is being challenged, and there's really good work in that. But we've almost turned it into snobbery about, oh, you're going to college, and not college. And that's wrong. Everybody in this room will get on fine without ever needing a geologist. That's my degree. But everybody in this room is going to need a mechanic and a tiler and a hairdresser. Do you know, and I think we've turned that into snobbery.
Yeah, yeah.
And my job is, if you have the ability and the desire to go to college, neither a disability nor a learning difficulty nor your social or economic circumstances should be the thing that hold you back. And that's the DARE scheme and the HERE scheme.
Do you know what? I was gonna ask you about that, because just one thing I want to say is that our brains, human brains, were not wired to read and to write. Our brains
Mine
have had
wasn't
to
anyway.
rewire over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands and millions of years in order to basically deal with text. So for you know, it is very frustrating. There's such an emphasis on having to go through this academic system, but it is what it is, and people like you are helping our students to get through. I wanted to ask you about race and DARE, and you just mentioned something else. Here, because parents will say to me, oh, the DARE or the race, and then there's confusion over which is which. And could you just talk us through
No problem. I'll do a big
both of those?
So RACE is reasonable accommodations in certificate exams. So if a student has a diagnosis and a load of recommendations, part of which would be assistive technology, they can apply to RACE. That's part of the State Exams Commission for the Junior Cert and the Leaving Cert, to have accommodations in the exam. It might be that they need to be near a loo. It might be that they type in their exams. It might be that they use a reading pen in their exams. It depends on the student. It depends on their assessment, and it depends on their application. And it's very individualised, and they have to apply to RACE in the year they're doing their exam.
That was one of the questions one of the parents had. Absolutely. Okay. So yeah. Okay, that's good. So that's for junior cert and for leaving cert.
It's certificate exams. It's the state exams. And there would have been a time where you'd get a reader or a scribe. That's not the case anymore. Mainly the volume has gone up. So I don't know what the hourly rate is for those. And the technology can offer a whole load more. And it also doesn't foster independence. You're not going to get a scribe at work. You're not going to get a scribe. You know, you have to set people up for independence and success in the world after school.
But one of the things they don't get is additional time until third level.
Not until third level.
Not until the only exception, as I understand it, is if there is extreme anxiety, you can apply for 10 minutes of additional time.
Yeah.
That's
movement
what
break.
I have.
I'm a little bit familiar with RACE. I'm not very familiar with RACE. I do know it's done on an individual basis, and you have to apply the year of your exam. So it's not like you're in first year and you know what your accommodations are going to be for your junior cert, and you can aim towards them.
See, I think it's very frustrating for a lot of parents who fork out a fortune to get their kids assessed in primary school, and then they have to do it again in order to. So this is another. You're looking confused, which is interesting because I've got some parents say, well, we need to get another education psychology report, don't
who?
we, for junior cert or for senior cert. And as far as I'm aware, it's down to the head teachers.
And they're
decision.
changing it and they're evolving it all the
Right.
time. So if I can go on to DARE in here, and
Yeah,
it'll come
and then
back because
we'll come
it'll
back to that.
explain.
Yeah.
So DARE is the disability access route to education. If we're all in the same class in Leaving Cert and I've got Crohn's disease, or you're hard of hearing, or you've got cerebral palsy, or someone has dyslexia, someone has a mental health issue, then, and they're competing with other people for points in the Leaving Cert, and if that's their want places in college, that's really unfair. So originally, different colleges were trying to level the playing field for students with disabilities, but now the DARE scheme is a national scheme that a huge amount of colleges take part in, and it's attached to the CAO. So when a student is applying through the CAO for their
Can you just explain the CAO to listeners?
the Central Applications Office.
Perfect.
So students who are doing their Leaving Cert who'd like to go on to college, the CAO is a Central Applications Office that you apply. You don't apply to NUIG on its own and Trinity on its own and UCC. It's a centralised application process. One of the questions that you're asked is, would you like to be considered for the DARE scheme? Make sure you answer yes to that question. And then you have to provide two kinds of evidence. Evidence of your disability or learning difficulty that meets the DARE criteria, and evidence of how it has negatively impacted on you in school. So that could be that you missed school, that you were using assistive technology, that you got accommodations in your exams. It depends on what the condition is and how it has impacted on them. So if a student can provide the right evidence of their disability and of how it's negatively impacted on them in college, in their coming up through secondary school, then they could be considered DARE eligible. Being DARE eligible means that you can compete with other DARE eligible applicants for the DARE places on each course. I know in UCC it's 5% of all places on all courses are set aside for DARE eligible applicants. So I can't do percentages in anything that isn't 100. So we're going to pretend there's 100 places in the first year course you're going for. 5 of those places are set aside for DARE eligible applicants that have provided their evidence of their disability that meets the DARE criteria, evidence of how it has negatively impacted on their education. And if 7 students have applied for that course who didn't get the points they needed, but were DARE eligible, they can then compete with one another for the 5 places. And it's back to it being a points competition, but it's a fairer points competition. In general, it would be the highest in points out of that 7 students, would be the 5 highest points. But if a student has sensory disability, so that's like being deaf or being blind, or has a physical disability, they would be treated more favourably in being given those places over the other disabilities, because those students are underrepresented at third level still. Statistically, they're underrepresented.
And that makes sense as well.
And the other part of that equation then is the HERE scheme. So HERE is the Higher Education Access Route. And while DARE is set up to tackle disadvantage because of a disability or a learning difficulty, HERE is set up to tackle disadvantage because of somebody's social or financial circumstances. The example I always give is my dad was a stonemason. My mum served dinners in the canteen out in Foss on Rossa Avenue. Neither one of them ever finished school. My pal's parents were a doctor and a teacher. And if you knew nothing about me and nothing about her, you knew who was going to college and you knew who wasn't going to college. Yeah. It's trying to level the playing field around social and economic circumstances. You have to provide evidence because the system has to be fair and transparent so that it's the right eligible students that are able to take advantage of these schemes. If a student applies to the DARE scheme and to the HERE scheme, and you can apply to both, people think you can only do one or the other. It's pulling together a lot of documents, and I know that's daunting in itself. But if you qualify under both, you go to the top of the list of being allocated those places because you've been doubly disadvantaged.
Oh, really?
So do you remember the five places? If one of those students is both DARE eligible and HERE eligible, they will go to the top of the list. And I would say pick HERE, then pick joining UCC as a HERE student.
Yes.
Because you get financial support.
And it's the socioeconomic
Yeah,
disadvantage.
but you still can register with the Disability Support Service for your supports in UCC. And really importantly, a student does not have to be a DARE student to get supports once they're in college. People are concerned going, oh my God, he'll get the points he needs and he won't be a DARE student. So it's really important to we have currently over 2,200 students registered with Disability Support Service in UCC across a whole range of disabilities. Roughly half of them got in through the DARE scheme. The other half got the points they needed, got into their course, but they require supports to level the playing field for them in college. They still have to produce the work. They still have to produce the goods.
You know, all these different students then that you have with learning differences and disabilities, do they have a key worker in UCC? Or like not so much a key worker, no, but would there be somebody assigned to them to help them in whatever way they need?
We
help
have it.
with the
So when people come into UCC,
do they?
when they're registering with UCC, they're asked, would they like to register with the Disability Support Service?
Okay.
And please register.
Okay.
Because we're not telepathic and there's 25,000 students on campus.
Please register.
Yeah, well, because I think a lot of students, having got through the massive hurdle that is the Leaving Cert, they have what I call I'm fine, I'm grand syndrome. I'm grand, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm grand. I'm grand, I don't want to be registering with anybody. And then something goes wrong with an assignment, something goes wrong with an exam, and they're stressed out of their head, and then they contact us. Now, they can register then, but it makes a lot more sense to register earlier on, where the interventions can be more effective because they're put in there earlier. And a big concern is if they haven't contacted us to register by, it's roughly around the middle of October, we can't put exam accommodations in place for those students because there's 25,000 students sitting exam at Christmas. They can't rock up the day before and going, I type in my exams. We're going, well, hang on a second, we've this organised for our 2,200 students, never mind the bigger body of students. So it's really important that they register early on. Now, part of that registration is twofold. If I've come up to the junior cert and the Leaving Cert, I've had my diagnosis long ago, I know what works for me, I know what accommodations suit my needs, I can do a self-screening. And then I can submit that and I can say, well, I need my extra time in my exams. I need a spelling and grammar waiver. I need to be typing in my exams. It depends on the student. It depends on their differences. Our team will look over the people who are self-screening because that's a new thing we've introduced recently. For people who kind of will you just give me the extra time? I don't want to be calling into anybody. I know what I need. And so they don't take resources then from maybe more of our high-end needs students. So the self-screening will get assessed with your documentation and they'll go, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. That's grand. We'll just sort that out. There may be one or two where they go, maybe we just have a meeting with them and make sure that their needs are being met and that the supports are appropriate for them. The vast majority of students outside that then will have a needs assessment, one-to-one with the disability advisor. It can be online if people don't like the in-person scenario, or it can be in person. They look at that student's strengths, what it is they find difficult, the supports that have been effective on the way up, and the nature of the course that they're doing. So a student who's going in to do labs in chemistry, physics, biology will have a whole different set of needs to a student who's heading off on work placement with a company down in Ringaskiddy or something. So it's looking at the student's strengths and differences, supports that have been effective to build on those, and the nature of the course they're doing in that year, in that semester sometimes. And our top priority in putting supports in place is independence.
You see all
maximising independence.
See all that you just said, Deirdre. It's fantastic. It's a dream.
I feel a butt coming on.
And there is. Because the butt is, that stuff should be done in primary school.
Oh my goodness. It's exactly what I was about to say.
That should be done.
This is very top heavy. Amazing, but top heavy.
It should be done in primary, like instead of, there'd be no suffering then. Kids are getting what they require, and I'm always very vocal about this because of my own education. Because the system back then and the way I was being taught didn't suit me. And I couldn't handle sitting in a classroom because I felt so uncomfortable being asked. I used to keep my head down like this. No, this is reading Anne and Barry. And I struggled. And I couldn't read. It was on the board. You know, you'd go to the toilet when the teacher was asking the classroom to start reading in the class, or else I'd be disruptive and she'd tell me to go back to the back of the class or go up to the principal. I just could not handle it. But if we had these supports now in 2024 in schools, can you imagine, right? Can you imagine how many children would stay in school longer and would enjoy the whole education process better? You know,
and more basic than that our education system wouldn't make a person feel stupid, because I think that's
Right.
just tragic. And now I'm saying that, and I want to acknowledge there are teachers in there making this work, and the influence that they have is fabulous. And sometimes, despite a system, they make it work because they're so passionate and they're so dedicated and they're such good communicators, and they have those learners' interests at best heart. One-to-one needs assessments for everybody in the education system. It might come back to just the learning, something as simple as learning styles and that. But the other side of it is, if we teach with universal design for learning approaches, then we're not trying to fit square pegs into a round hole, that we're not teaching. If you think of it, the education system came around roughly around the kind of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And it was almost like the factories at the time: churn people in, do this with them, churn them out. And we kind of, huge classes, we hit down the middle, we gave them a bit of extra time, we gave them a bit of extra work. And that was as individualised as it got. Now, thank goodness, our class ratios are getting smaller. Ways to go on that as well. But universal design for learning, if I teaching you about the water cycle and I teach it to you, I tell you it, I show you examples. We've got videos now. We might
Multisensory.
Yeah, we might. So how something is taught with lots of different ways of representing that material, and for the students to engage with those materials. And then at the other end, when we're trying to assess who has learned, what have they learned, how well have they learned it, that the assessments are in various different ways of assessing, that it isn't just that one exam that puts the fear of God in some people. Yeah. I remember there was a girl I studied with, I better not say her name, she'll kill me stone dead, but I knew her seat in the library, and if she wasn't in that seat, she was either at lunch or at a lecture, from one end of the year to the other. She's a Trojan worker, she has her PhD now, she's a dinger. And I could cruise a little bit because cramming used to work for me. And I would come up with better results in a lot of our exams than hers. And like, I remember going, there's something wrong with this system, because I know who I want to employ, not me, her. Do you know, she's the person who'll put her head down the whole way along. So that exam system just used to put anxiety and stress in a bright, hard-working young one. So I think that multiple forms of assessment needs to come in as well.
She's a classic example of someone who needs additional support through assistive technology. And just going back to what you were saying as well, I 100% agree in this whole universal design for learning, which I would also call multisensory teaching, multisensory learning. And the problem we have, though, is when it comes to the bureaucracy of what specific supports are put in place. So, for example, I'm working with twins. They both, so one has a diagnosis of one thing, and then another one has a diagnosis, there's a bit of comorbidity going on. They had the same results, but one qualified for a laptop and the other one didn't. And then, one fell at the second percentile and the other one was below the second percentile. And there's this big thing about the second percentile. But as I was reading on one of these parents groups, that actually it's quite a grey area, because it doesn't say in the paperwork you have to fall below the second percentile. So it's slightly unfair, and it doesn't...
And that only qualifies you for funding. That doesn't mean you can't use it.
No, exactly. And then I've got another parent saying, why is there such a long waiting list? It's one... So it goes back to, there's something not quite right at the primary level going into secondary. I think there's a lot of great stuff going on with third level, but something, got very frustrated parents, and a lot of confusion about what people can qualify for, what they can't qualify. How do you get there? How don't you get there?
Yeah.
How do we wave a magic wand?
I mean, like, when you were talking there, just something just popped into my head, and like it sounds like third level education have it in relation to.
We have to keep reviewing it and
Yes.
improving it, definitely.
But you have it in relation to there are assistive technologies there. There are supports there for people that are struggling with whatever's going on for them. But what popped into my head is, like, we have primary school, for example, and sometimes assistive technology might be a little bit too much, and even school can be too much for young people. Like, my understanding of what children need at that young age is just emotional regulation. Just ways to help
And critical
them,
thinking.
you know, how to cope, how to treat each other, how to be able to cope with emotional stuff when it comes up, instead of just running around the yard and you know, and that form of structure, moving on then into maybe secondary, where they're being introduced to maybe the academic side a little bit more, and then into third level, like that, for me, would have probably worked as a young person. You know, where it wasn't like, you have to know this, you have to know that, and if you don't, you're not going to be successful in any way or form in your life. You know, and that's how it was shown to me. And that was no disrespect to any of my teachers or the principal, because that's just the way that things were back then. But now, today, we know better, and it's still not happening.
But I tell you what else we haven't discussed. This is the impact of social media, which obviously comes through technology, on the emotional regulation of a lot of our learners, because there's a huge amount going on technically outside of school that's been brought into school, and we have difficulties with digital literacy, where this idea of bullying, things being misinterpreted,
Internet safety.
Yeah, we've got, I know that's a whole nother podcast altogether, but it is something that is very current that we didn't have when we were in school. We didn't have this whole online world happening at the same time, and it has a huge impact on mental health and the well-being of our students. Primary school, secondary school, I go in for Cyber Safe Kids, I go into primary schools, and there are kids in second class who have mobile phones, who are on apps that are designed for people who are over the age of 13. And they know how to work the apps, for sure. They really do. And in fact, a question I got from one of the parents here, what does Deirdre think about phones being banned in schools? Are people more sociable when phones are removed from the school environment? On the other hand, are we stopping students from using a valuable resource? A smartphone is essentially access to a computer in their pocket. Do the pros outweigh the cons?
Again, it's like the artificial intelligence. It's a tool, and it's up to us how we use it. I think managing the logistics of it in school is not possible.
Right.
And the feedback I get, and I would go to teachers on this.
I'd agree with this.
I do think it needs to come away, and I think learning those social skills, that interacting with one another,
Digital literacy.
that's missing. No, but the human stuff, that's really, really important. We were only talking about this the other day. My dad was the youngest of 13. We all went up to my nana's every Sunday. It was like the TARDIS. There'd be like hundreds of us inside. But we learnt a lot, and we got slagged, and we got ribbed, and we got teased, and you'd have a laugh. But we learnt a lot of social skills from that I think, looking at the screen the whole time is people are missing out developing those skills. I think what I showed you, what the phones can do, you can point your camera at text, it'll read it out loud to you. You can point your camera at text, it'll scan it in, read it to you, and highlight the word that is being read as it's being read. But why wouldn't that be for homework? Because the vast majority of the reading and writing is going to be done at homework anyway. So I don't think it's essential to have it in the classroom, because I do think it gets in the way. I think
100% agree.
We coped a lot before.
But
I don't see why they should like, there's a great book by a guy called Johann Hari. It's called Stolen Focus.
Okay.
And he speaks about the effects of social media and how it's after robbing the attention of our children and ourselves in a way. And he just talks about how all these massive corporations, your Facebooks and everything else, have employed the best of the best in psychology to be able to figure out algorithms to be able to keep your attention on your phone or this app.
And the more outrageous and the more offensive, the more likely you are to get sucked into it more. So I think it kind of
They're
The
designed to look
emphasises
like
release-
negative.
sweets. The apps are designed to look like sweets, to look colourful and glittery and
Or
exciting.
and he speaks about, do you know, the vibration or the ping with the like. Like, there's a hit of dopamine.
The endorphins.
every
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
And it's been released. And it's like every time the phone beeps,
But what about when
the
that-
urge to go to it? It's like,
They all have an off switch.
But then when it's not liked as well.
I'll tell you something, Deirdre. I took the phone off my son there last year, right? And I told him I was taking it for a few days because he went over. We have the screen time allowance during the day, and I think it's fair. I took the phone off him one morning because he was way over by about 4 hours, and he literally, I swear to God, I thought the child was going to have a mental breakdown. He started crying at the kitchen table, and I was saying to my wife Nicole, I said, "What the fuck?" Like, I couldn't understand it. You see, I wasn't brought up with a phone. I couldn't understand the real connection. And after that experience, I was a little bit lighter with him because I didn't understand the real sense of a connection. But now what I do is when he goes over, I said, "Yeah, like you understand how much time out of your life this small little device is taking from you." But he's saying, like, "Dad, what am I supposed to do? This
But
is
there's
how I
lots of
connect."
alternatives.
He's saying, "This is how I connect with my friends. All my friends are doing it. You know, all my friends, they're on the Facebook, not the Facebook, with them it's the Snapchat or the TikTok. You know, and us, because we weren't around them growing up, we don't understand the real sense of connection that kids have. Like, our sense of connection when we were kids was we went out and we climbed trees, we had a game, kick the can, or knock, run away in our case. You know, but today it's like, they'll be at home and they'll be on the Snapchat.
And the gaming. It's also the gaming, and unfortunately the gaming is designed to be addictive. So we're also encouraging addiction, but again, it's just another podcast.
This is about another 4 podcasts. That's what I hate to
I
tell
think
you.
it's a series.
No, it is.
Yeah.
But the balance has to be, and we're not their best pals. This is me doing the parenting stuff, not the assistive technology. We're not their best pals. If we're not public enemy number 1 once a week, we're probably not doing it right. You know, you don't give in to everything that everybody wants. Not everything is easy.
Yeah.
Not everything is happy-go-lucky. And it has to be a bit tough sometimes. And if that's no phones in the bedroom or limited screen time or whatever. But the fact that there are such enabling tools on them, and seeing as you need to nearly surgically remove them from their wrist to get them into the shower, why wouldn't we be using it for a bit of learning? Do you know?
Yeah.
And that's, I suppose, when we were kids, our way of being social was being out in the street, because you weren't left in the house, basically. Get out in the street and you're left there till late at night. And I can even remember the weather back then seemed to be better for some reason. But today, it's like, go on out in the street. No.
But in our day, it was get up from in front of the TV, you'll have square eyes.
Yeah.
Do you know,
Yeah.
that,
No,
al-
that's
that
true.
also had an off switch, and I'm a complete telly addict.
Yeah.
Do you know, I do.
Yeah.
I
But
could
it's-
look up a tree.
But the telly can be good for you in some ways. The telly can help a person to switch off, completely switch off. Like,
Well,
And
also
get
for
lost in something
visual,
else.
for people who have good, strong visual memories, and yet they struggle, you know, maybe with the reading and the writing, they can learn so much from. I mean, my husband comes out with most incredible information that he's got from these documentaries, or like, how do you know that? Where have you learned that?
It's
And
back to it being a tool and what we
Yeah.
use it for, and it can be used for
Exactly.
wonderful stuff or dreadful stuff, usually a lot of mediocre stuff.
Yeah.
But again, they all have an off switch, and it's about that balance, I think.
Yeah.
And we can't be frightened of the phones or frightened of AI. We have to embrace the good stuff and the moderation and the off switch.
What would be some of the best advice that you could offer somebody that's maybe struggling with a learning difference and hasn't used maybe software before because they're afraid of it, because maybe they struggle on the laptop or our own technology in general?
For the basics of technology, Uncasan are a group that have done, and this is all ages, this is not just for school. They've created 2 different really good tools. One is a kind of a self-assessment tool. I'll share the links of these with you. Yeah? One is a self-assessment tool. I might be brilliant at online shopping, but I don't know how to do email. Or I might be fantastic at being all over Facebook, but I don't know how to look up something if I need some information on, I don't know, social welfare or something. There's a self-assessment tool, seeing where your skills are and where the gaps are. Then following on from that, there's Uncasan Stepping Stones, which is bite-sized training on individual IT skills. This is not for assistive technology and junior certs and leaving cert. This is for functioning day to day. But IT literacy is probably more fundamental and more important now than literacy. And the people who are kept outside that are massively disadvantaged, like really disadvantaged.
Very isolating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a game changer for the people for whom literacy is not a runner. My phone can read everything to me. I've often been running to meetings late, going, oh no, I don't have that report read. And I can be sprinting across college. And literally the report has been read to me as I'm thundering across college.
I love the microphone. How do you do this or whatever?
Oh,
and then it just comes up with it. It's amazing.
Like, okay, Google or Siri or...
I don't even know what I'm using. I press the microphone button and it just sort of... It works.
But those tools with Uncasan, that kind of self-assessment and then leading you on to, well, it sounds like you're not great at this. I might know how to take the photographs, but I don't know how to email them or something. It literally gives you bite-sized training in that. And I honestly think there's a new digital strategy for schools for 2027. COVID kind of gave us a bit of a shake going, yeah, you have to cop on, lads. Technology is here. It ain't going anywhere. But I'm still fascinated that touch typing and file management, keeping yourself safe online, are not and critical thinking aren't fundamental parts of a curriculum at the moment, because it's what everybody needs going forward, whether I'm going to do my PhD, whether I'm going to become a carpenter, whether I'm going to work in early years education. Those are skills I need to have.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's about resourcing it, and the education system changes slowly. There are fabulous people in there making it work every day.
Definitely.
We could name them.
Yeah.
The people who got us to where we're at. I'm really, really, really grateful to them. The technology is just a new tool in that. And I have, I remember watching this. Now, to be fair, it was people selling us technology, but they had a sequence of quotes from very reputable educational journals. And the first one was, this paper crack is fine, like, but, you know, they're not always going to have paper. They don't know how to clean the slate without, you know, getting themselves destroyed. Another, no, granted, that was like the late 1800s or something. But early 1900s, they were saying, shop-bought ink is fine, but what are they going to do when they don't have shop-bought ink? It's really going to impact on their education. Do you know how to make ink? Yeah. Has it impacted on your education? Do you know, and then they went to, I'm so old, it feels dreadful. I can remember we used to do fountain pens. We went from the pencil to fountain pens rather than the ballpoint pen, because they thought we'd be more careful.
That means I'm old too, because I remember that, yeah.
And I'm left-handed, so I'd write with the fountain pen and then smear it as I wrote it. Yeah. And I can remember 2 teachers, and I loved them both. They were both fabulous. I was in Toker Girls' School, and I was weak for them both. And they said, this ballpoint pen is going to make them sloppy. It's going to make them lazy. Has your ballpoint pen made you sloppy?
Absolutely.
So there has been resistance to technology all the way up. Do you not remember being told, you won't always have a calculator in your pocket? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Or a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
A computer,
but just even the calculator would do me.
Yeah.
There's we're creatures of habit. We're resistant to change. So that's why I really think this stuff has to go into teacher training.
But the fact is, it is now 1 in 5 pupils have a learning difference. 1 in 5. So, you know, we have got to have an education system that adapts to being able to train teachers to go into a classroom, and if you've got a classroom of 25, you're going to have 5 students, at least, let's face it, 5 pupils in there who are going to have a learning difference. Let's use this universal design for learning. Let's use multisensory teaching. Let's improve our skills in technology. We've got to adapt to what we have now. And these are facts. 1 in 5 learners have a learning difference.
But if we do the UDL approach, that universal design for learning approach, so say that blind student was in my class, I can make a sound file of the prayers before and after Holy Communion, of the lines for the school play, of the synopsis of Romeo and Juliet, of the physics definitions for honours leaving cert for the physics. I can give it to that blind student. I've made it once. I can share it with my dyslexic students. Yeah. Why wouldn't I share it with all my students?
Exactly.
And they have it in text, and they have it in a sound file, and we might have it represented, like you say, with that lots of senses involved in it. It's that approach of variety of representation, variety of different types of engagement to suit the different strengths in that group, and a variety of assessments, that it isn't that one size fits all, because we're pushing people.
And going back to that, there's not one size fits all. What do you think, and this is a question for both of you, what do you think is stopping our education system in doing that? In just making it?
I have an answer, but you go for it.
Go on.
Well, it's unfortunately, what they talk about low-hanging fruit in politics, that they tend to, what's going to get voters, they're obviously very interested in voters, it's the low-hanging fruit, it's the stuff that doesn't cost a lot. Having such big changes, there's fear of change. There's fear in people, communities, everyone, and it costs money as well to roll out new types of, you've got a whole new, we're talking about a new teaching program, or adding on to what already exists, and it does cost money. And I think that personally, I think this is part of the problem. And then you've got the people at the top who really need to accept that society has changed, and therefore they need to adapt to that change. And I think it's very, very difficult to get that message across.
I think one of the biggest challenges is our exam system, and sometimes the exam system gets in the way of education.
Okay.
Because you've got students who are passionate or learning something, really keen at going, it's not in the curriculum, or you have to produce it this way to jump through the hoop of the exam. But the exam system was brought in place to be fair. Again, to move away from my daddy was the dentist and my daddy was that, therefore I'm on the path. The exams were about it being merit-based. And if you could produce the goods, didn't matter who you were, you produced the goods. So it was a very good attempt at being fair, at being impartial. The Exams Commission, with all its faults, are trying to hang on to the integrity of the exam and the fairness across the board. But it disadvantages a huge proportion of our learners.
Okay.
So how do we change the exam system?
You're electing me to be Minister for Education. I'll do that then. I do AT.
I'll elect you.
But that's a great point. We need people that are on the ground, that understand what's going on in schools and in colleges, to be making decisions like this. Not somebody that's just after joining a role for the last 6 or 7 months. They're completely new to it, and they're being advised by somebody who's inside in this office in the education system for the last 20 years, and they don't like change.
We all resist change to an extent. I can
do.
understand it, but when you can see the benefits it can offer.
Yeah.
You see, the Dyslexia Association of Ireland, for example, has been lobbying for change. And a lot of it falls on deaf ears. It's very frustrating.
I think the volume of people who have an official diagnosis now are going to make that resistance less.
Yeah. I think there will be a lot more noise because it's affecting every single family in Ireland at the moment. Some families, they have maybe 2 kids that may have a learning difference or an additional need, So it's not something that can be kept under wraps for too much longer, because we need to find ways, and this is my belief in how it affects us. We need to find ways to keep kids in school, okay? and find ways that they're enjoying school. And that means changing the whole thing, changing the whole system. And it also means that every child that goes into a classroom in Ireland, and if that teacher has been trained around noticing learning differences and additional needs or whatever it may be, that they recommend this child to get an assessment. And I believe that these assessments should be free for every child in Ireland, whether they have money in the family or not. And that's what we need to do, because families who have money, who are fortunate in this country, they can get their child assessed, get the report, and the child can be exempt from certain things. But whereas a child that comes from poverty and the family don't have it, and the school can't get these assessments or pay for them, get the funding, they're going to struggle. And what happens then, this child is struggling, and school then becomes a place of stress and anxiety from, right? And they don't go to school. So they start going on the hop from school. And when they're on the hop from school, they start getting involved in antisocial behaviour. And they start doing things that shouldn't be doing, robbing. No, I'm just speaking about myself and my own circumstances.
If the system doesn't suit you, you figure out ways around it or stuff to succeed in other measures or something.
Yeah. And what happens, you just go down the wrong road, Deirdre. You go down that road and school becomes something of a nightmare, something that was never for you. Do you ever hear people in their adulthood saying, education's not for me? And that's usually based on a really negative experience in school. We need to change that form of thinking. We need to change that mentality. We need education to be, yeah, geez, I love school.
There's nobody I know that dislikes learning, but education is different. Do you know, there's the David Attenborough documentary on the telly, or the kid who's playing with a pile of muck and rocks and they're trying to see how does it stick together, and, you know.
Building a tower,
So I think sometimes gearing people towards jumping through the hoops. Now, this is very idealised. This is, you know, this may not be practical, but if you're just designing people to jump through hoops, you've got somebody like me who can cram at the last minute, get away with it. And the person who slogs all the way along, the anxiety, the exam trips them up. So, but again, and I know I'm like a cracked record, the universal design for learning approach actually addresses all that. You probably don't even need diagnosis if you go that way. Because if you're representing your teaching in lots of different ways to suit the different learning styles, sure, why do you need the diagnosis? Because in my head, the diagnosis is about getting special accommodations.
I was about to say, it's the system, isn't it?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
You need a diagnosis to get these special accommodations.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't know whether I should be saying this, and it's been recorded. My family eat, sleep and drink books, and I hated them the whole way up. I have a cousin that I loved. I can remember her giving me a present, I'd say about my 9th birthday, of a book, and I said, thanks very much. Climbed into my mother's arms and went, why would anybody give me a book for a present, for God's sake? I just hated reading. I remember what I hear. I can bluff well. I got away with it in school. And I do like learning, and I'm excited by learning. And I had really good teachers, but the reading, murder. And at a drinking party in college with a load of applied psychology students, they were doing this test and they were all cracking up laughing, and I did the test and they went, you're not supposed to be able to do that. And I'm going, they said, were you ever tested for dyslexia? Sure, geez, our age. No, of course you weren't. And like, I wrote backwards when I was small. I can still write backwards. It still looks right to me. And it just explained that the reading, no, I just don't like, I can read in front of you, wouldn't think there was anything wrong. I don't. It doesn't go in. It's not retainable. It's not processable. It doesn't come back out. Whereas if I hear it, it's fine. But if it's not necessary to have the diagnosis, if we have UDL as the way of approaching education, because the diagnosis is to get special accommodations, special, typing in my exam, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
I do. The only thing I would say is that sometimes the diagnosis helps us
me
to
understand
the internal, the intrinsic
it
part
makes
of
sense.
It helps them to. It helps the belief systems that molded them in their young years in school change. you know, particularly when they start researching maybe dyslexia and the attributes to it, how it is and how it has affected them. What happens is it like, Jesus, do you know what? I'm actually not tick.
That
Do
all
you know
makes
what?
sense.
There's
yeah.
nothing wrong with me, my brain actually, you know, not that.
But it offers another
Yeah.
perspective on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And a bit of context
Yeah.
for how you learn.
I think again, this is going to be another podcast, but what we have an issue with here is that there aren't enough education psychologists.
Yeah.
Even if we manage to get the government to go, okay, we're going to give everyone free assessments.
Yeah.
Where are the education psychologists? NEPS is in a dire state, isn't it? You know, in the papers.
And can I put my bugbear in?
Yeah.
They're fabulous professionals with a wealth of training, wealth of experience, like the teachers, like the occupational therapists. But AT and IT is not on their training.
Yeah.
Well,
So
there's
they-
another problem.
At best, they do a bit of Googling, a bit of maybe consulting peers, and a bit of copy and paste from one report to the other. And I've met them, and they're fabulous people with, again, bucket loads of learning under their belt and bucket loads of experience. And now they're expected, like the teachers, to be IT and AT geniuses when it hasn't formed part of their
Such a
training.
good point.
Yeah, 100%.
In fact, I read a report yesterday, and there was no mention, and he was fifth year. There was no mention of any form of technology. at
May
all.
not have been relevant to him, I don't know.
I asked him. I said that, and he said I prefer to handwrite, and that and I was
But-
like, oh, okay, maybe it's
And here's another podcast. I think it's the being different. We spend the rest of our lives proving what a fabulous individual we am, and I think so independently, and I'm such. But
We are.
but in the teenage years, that I want to blend into the wallpaper, and the technology part that gets hit by that then, because I don't want to be different. I don't want to be seen to be using the different device to everybody else.
I've heard this so many times, particularly
Yeah.
girls not wanting to use laptops in front of others.
Now I still go. Name a job where you're not going to be using a keyboard.
I know.
Because if anything, they're going to be ahead of the posse. If they've got those IT skills for work, for further education or for higher education, they're a lot more appropriate than the pen and pencil. Do you know? So again, it needs to be mainstreamed and part for everybody. And then we actively include those learners who have to use those tools for their engagement with the curriculum. And they're not the odd one out, or the idea that everybody does it differently. And I have to say, I think in schools we can dictate that. Remember, when I was going to school, you'd be called four eyes if you had glasses. Tell me that doesn't happen anymore, because they go, oh yeah, you need glasses and you don't. So what? That's not a big deal. I'd like to see the technology in the same format, but it's up to us to create that environment. So in some schools, taking out the device is a real stigma. And I know of another school, it was a primary school, where they, on a Tuesday and a Thursday afternoon, they do a half an hour and they bring them in and they do file management, touch typing skills, the basic IT stuff. And they made it so popular that the other parents were literally banging on the door going, I never got the form about the IT classes. How come my fella's not signed up for that? And you're going, because they don't have a diagnosis. They turned it into such a positive thing. And I've pulled together a free resource or course on free or built-in technology to make learning easier.
Look at that. Look at that.
That's powerful, yeah.
Yeah.
But the link,
Yeah,
share the
yeah,
link with the
please.
world and its
Yeah.
mammy. And there's videos taking you through touch typing, file management, never mind talking to your phone to have it to type what you say, getting the phone to read to you, Office 365, Google, mind mapping. But I offer training in that through the Cork Education Support Centre, and it's really lovely to work with them. I do two-hour training sessions, so I did one tonight. That's why I was late. And from 5 to 7 online, and then next week I'll have the same gang of teachers from 5 to 7 online. And in the week in between, I say, will you go away and play with a couple of the tools? Try them out with one or two students. Come back to me with what your observations are, what went wrong, what questions you have, and download other stuff that we're going to be doing next week. And a teacher from an all-boys school, as an English teacher, came in the second week, and I said, did you get a chance to... They're very busy. Sometimes they just don't get a chance to play with them. I said, did you give it a lash? She said, oh God, yeah, we took out the phones. Now she got them to do it in the class. And they were getting it to read too fast and too slow. And they were getting it to read with the German voice, to read the English, and having a bit of a laugh and keeping it kind of lighthearted, which I think is brilliant. And she said, at the end, I asked, so who's going to use this to make their reading easier tonight? And she said, every young fella in the class put their hand up, bar the 3 that have the diagnosis. Because they see that as, I'm just kind of letting everybody know that I've got something wrong with me or whatever. But those 3 young fellas saw everybody else going, Sure, of course you would. Of course we're going to use it. You'd be daft not to use this.
Yeah.
And now, see how that kind of normalised
Yeah.
it, and that
Domino
we're
effect, yeah.
actively including those learners.
That was powerful.
Isn't she a dinger?
Yeah.
And it really can make an enormous difference from that shoulders down and, oh God, I'm fed up and I'm stupid and I'm no good to,
Yeah.
look what I did.
That's powerful.
Brilliant.
So, Georgie, geez, we covered a lot here.
I mean, there's still so much more, but
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can't do it.
We'll
We'll
definitely
all
have to get you
collapse.
I
back
still think
again,
they should
Deirdre.
teach cooking to every one of them.
But listen,
There's another
hopefully,
podcast.
hopefully the next time you're here, you'll be the Minister for Education.
No, have you not
Got on
noticed? I put 3 feet in it sometimes.
We'll change the
I'm not
education
political.
system in this country. But listen to me, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For coming.
Thanks,
And thank
thank
you,
you.
Georgie. Thank you. Fantastic conversation. Very interesting. I hope a lot of people at home will get whatever information they needed from tonight around the here and there. And what was the other one again?
Here, there,
Dare,
race,
and race.
and the free technology to make learning easier.
And all the technology that we spoke about, there'll be a link in the description at the bottom of the podcast. And Tony will have all that up. Yeah, Tony. So listen, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast this evening, right, and if you know somebody that will get some information from this or will benefit from the conversations we had here, please share. It'll be on all platforms, Spotify, Google, Acast, and YouTube. So listen, again, it's from me, Timmy Long, at the Long Way Back podcast, Georgie and Deirdre. Thank you so much for tuning
Thanks
in,
a bit.
and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.